begin not critical of somebody else, not trying to highlight the failures and foibles of some larger system. We're going to get to the system. System's very important. Criticizing other people is very important. But you begin with yourself. You begin with what Antonio Gramsci, one of the great philosophers of education, deeply influenced people like Paulo Freire and Bell Hooks and others. These are radical fears of education. You begin with a critical self-inventory. A critical self-inventory, which is a situating and locating of yourself. What has gone into the shaping and molding of you as a human being, as a educator. And so I begin with myself. I am who I am because somebody loved me. I always begin on a note of gratitude. I'm so happy I had the mom and daddy happy. I can take no credit for it. It's just grace operating in my life. So that as an educator, I always recognize that kind of piety. And piety at its deepest level is the acknowledgement of the good and the sources of good in your life, in your trek from your mama's womb to tomb. The gifts and goodness, mom, dad, grandma, granddad, aunt, uncles, friends, teachers, coaches. Could be folk you met on the block who gave you a word of encouragement and affirmation at a moment you didn't know was coming. That's the starting point, because that's going to be the source of both your empowerment and your openness to others, so that as you cultivate your gifts, you will cultivate them in such a way that they will have a moral and spiritual excellence. Now, the Greek call it excellence arete, A-R-E-T-E, arete. Many translated as greatness. And somewhere I read, he or she is greatest among you will be your servant. That's my tradition. That's the prophetic legacy of Jerusalem. I'm a product of Shiloh Baptist Church from the chocolate side of Sacramento, California. Willie P. Cook was my pastor. He wasn't the CEO. Silver Echoes was the choir. It wasn't the praise team. And Sarah Ray was my vacation Bible school teacher. And she didn't have a brand. She had a cause. And she told me, little Ronnie, my name when I was growing up, don't you ever forget that if the kingdom of God is within you, and everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little heaven behind. Never forgot it. You can't leave heaven behind in this world without raising hell on earth for the kingdom. What does it mean, raising hell on earth? It means being tied to something bigger than you. That lures out the best of you. And so, critical self-inventory. Who you are. Who I am. Irene West. Clifton West. Reverend Cook. Deacon Hinton. Sarah Ray. Going to college. Professor John Rawls. Going to graduate school. Professor Richard Rorty. Going to Union Theological Seminary. James Cone. James Washington. James Forbes. All of these folks. When you see me, you are seeing effects and consequences of them in me, because they love me so. And all I can do is try to be true to that love. Stay on that love train, because that's the benchmark of moral and spiritual excellence. And we're living in a moment in the history of this nation, this country, this empire, where there's a spiritual collapse. It's the collapse of spiritual and moral greatness, the collapse of integrity, the collapse of honesty, the collapse of courage, the collapse of generosity, the collapse of empathy, the collapse of learning how to get outside of yourself in order to empower others so that you become a vehicle and a conduit to help others. All of us are wounded, but the question becomes, will we be wounded healers or wounded herders? Will you be a wounded helper of somebody who is also wounded? Or will your wounds lead toward your preoccupation with your own egocentric predicament such that even what comes out of you is in the wounding business? W.H. Auden, probably one of the greatest Christian poets of the 20th century, used to say the fundamental aim of a Christian, let alone a Christian educator, is try to convince others and live a life in which you try to love your crooked neighbor with your crooked heart. So it begins with critique. How is it that I can get these deposits of evil outside of my heart and soul? And that does come from systems and structures and institutions. Here we are in Los Angeles right here. We know the indigenous peoples were here. How did L.A. become L.A.? Well, the Spanish didn't get here. How come most of us not speaking Spanish, even though we've got so many of our precious brothers and sisters who are speaking Spanish? Because then the British got here. So never say African slavery was America's original sin. That's neoliberal chatter on the corporate media over the years. The first original sin was the treatment of indigenous peoples. The second sin was the treatment of my descendants. See, I never have to devalue somebody else's suffering in order to keep a spotlight on mine. I can keep a track of other people's suffering all around the country, all around the world. It could be Mexicans, it could be Muslims, it could be Arab, it could be Jews, it could be Palestinians, it could be Catholic, it could be Protestants, it could be Asians and Koreans, right across the board. And when you talk about excellence, spiritual, moral greatness, and service to others, you say, how do I best empower myself intellectually, morally, spiritually, politically, and economically so that I can be, in the language of the great John Coltrane, a real force for good. A real force for good. Now, I also come out of a tradition that in some ways, I was talking to my dear sister from Detroit. Where is she?
Right here.
Where is my dear sister? This she? Yeah, we were just talking about, Motown. Stevie Wonder, second now. Smokey. What is it about these black people? 400 years of terrorism, yet keep dishing out folks who want freedom for everybody. So you don't get black versions of the Ku Klux Klan as the dominant form of black freedom struggle. Could have. So every generation, you terrorize us, we're going to terrorize you right back. You got the Klan, we got a black version of the Klan. If that had been the dominant response to black people, there'd been a civil war every generation. There'd be no American democracy whatsoever. There'd be terrorist cells in every corner, in every nook and cranny of the nation. But no, in the face of terrorism under slavery, here comes Frederick Douglass. Here comes Harriet Tubman. Here comes Sojourner Truth. They're going to hate us, we're not going to hate back. We want liberty for everybody. Traumatized for 400 years, psychically, spiritually, socially, economically. Do we want to traumatize the others back? Come up with various strategies of traumatizing? No, we want healing. Look at these healers. From slavery, Jim Crow, senior to Jim Crow junior. That's what we live under now. Still got residential segregation, still got educational segregation. Go to the massive corporation regime, and who do you see? Our precious brown and black folk. But most importantly for educators concerned with moral and spiritual greatness, for 400 years, chronic systemic hatred coming at black folk, and black folk taught to hate themselves. And yet still teaching the world so much about love. I can just turn on John Coltrane's Love Supreme and sit down. Let that music soak every every corner of your soul. I can turn on Stevie Wonder's Love and Need a Love. I can just turn on Marvin Gaye's What's Going On and let you listen to the love flowing from every note and the silence between the notes. Who really cares? Save the babies. James Baldwin's Love So Get Saved. Love forces us to take off the mask we know we cannot live within, but fear we cannot live without. He was a love warrior too. We ain't even got the Fannie Lou Hamer or Martin Luther King Jr. yet. What love warriors? What is it about these people? It's not just a matter of their skin pigmentation, because we got black gangsters and black thugs too. It's a matter of what they do with their skin pigmentation, given white supremacist degradation of it, and through moral and intellectual formation, they become love warriors. And as professionals, you never ever forget the difference between a love warrior with professional skills and a polished professional who's not yet a love warrior. Very important. Because a polished professional is somebody who wants to be the smartest in the room. Sometimes you want to be the richest. Not you all. I'm talking about some of them. It becomes all about status and position and influence. Polished professional and all of the built-in culture of conformity. Got to conform to the dominant paradigms in the profession. When it comes to issues of taking a risk, cutting against the grain, being in the world but not of the world. Oh, no, I'm just a professional. I've got my skills that I'm deploying. I'm not here to be courageous and brave and pay a cost. Oh, no, I'm a professional. Oh, but a love warrior. Somebody, especially a love warrior who's been through the profession. Now you got intellectual weaponry. That's what you come to Pepperdine for. Where's Pepperdine? Here. I'm going to underline it with another line. 1937 to 2020. That second line says, yes, I'm here to be a professional. I want to be Socratized. I want questioning, interrogation, and scrutiny. But in the end, I want excellence. Moral, spiritual excellence. And you can never be an exemplar of moral and spiritual greatness if you are professional, but so conformist that you're well adjusted to injustice. And that's what this country oftentimes specializes in. That's one of the reasons why everyday people on the block, in the corner, in the beauty salons, and in the barbershop have a deep suspicion of highly educated folk. There's just rarely been the most highly educated folk who've been in the vanguard of fighting for the least of these. Once they get educated, they can't wait to be part of the silo, of the chattering classes, of those who are accepted as being at the top. There's nothing wrong with being anywhere, at the top, in the middle, on the corner. But the question is, what kind of person are you? Are you involved in a quest for moral and spiritual greatness? And you can find moral and spiritual greatness anywhere. I've taught in prison for 37 years. I see a whole lot of moral and spiritual greatness in the prison after they've undergone their transformation. We can just trot out Malcolm X just to have one example. And of course, I'm a Christian, he's a Muslim. I love that brother to death, and he loves me from the grave. That's the kind of love train I'm talking about. Cuts across religious lines, cuts across racial lines, cuts across gender lines, cuts across sexual orientational lines, cuts across national boundaries. It's a profoundly human thing. And let us never forget where the English word human comes from, the Latin humando. Humando means what in Latin? Burial. We are the creatures on our way to burial. That's where the word humility comes from. Your deepest humanity is going to be reflected in your humility, because that's a sign of your moral and spiritual greatness and maturity. And by humility, we're not talking about a cheap meekness. We're talking about a willingness to take a stand, but recognize you have your own limitations, so that humility is inseparable from tenacity. The most humble of people are those who are able to take a stand, but recognize that they don't have possession of truth, capital T, but fight anyway. That's what that genius from Vallejo had in mind, named Sly Stone. He wrote that song in 1970 called Stand. Yeah. I think you all probably too young to remember that song. Stand, you've been sitting much too long. There's a permanent crease in your right and wrong. That's Sly. Stand, there's a midget standing tall and the giant beside him about to fall. Stand, there's a cross for you to bear, things to go through if you going anyway. See, he's a product of the Pentecostal tradition. I'm Holy Ghost Baptist, so we got overlap, but it's not always the same. We Baptists got a little more hang loose. So I'm drinking cognac on Friday night, and they still praying, but that's all right. That's all right. Same Jesus, same Jesus. Hitting the nightclub on Saturday, and right there on Sunday morning, that's Holy Ghost Baptist, that's me. My brother understands the Riverside. Oh, that's me. That's why I was never called to be a preacher. Brother West sure staying late in the club. That's right. That's right, I'm a laborer. I'm going to be in the pew. I'm not going to be in the pulpit now. The Pentecostal brothers and sisters, we live in a Pentecostal moment. Yes, we are. Culturally, musically, especially in the black community. It started right here on Azusa Street, yeah, like here. But it was Holy Ghost Baptist from Tennessee who started it. Brother Seymour. So we got overlap. But the important thing is, Sly Stone, when he said there's a cross for you to bear, that's his connection to moral and spiritual greatness, that second line. That you could be the most sophisticated professional in the world, but if you ain't willing to bear a cross, you're going to end up surrendering to some idol. It's going to be the idol of your success rather than the idol of moral and spiritual greatness. Or you might even end up just worshiping the guild. Or even in a broader sense, worshiping the flag. I'm an American professional, so I don't have to be concerned about those brothers and sisters in Lebanon and Afghanistan and Pakistan and Iran and Iraq and Japan and Ethiopia and Guatemala. The slide said what? Every flag is under the cross. That's idolatrous. If you put any idol under the cross. But what does the cross signify when it comes to moral and spiritual excellence? Unarmed truth. And the condition of truth is always to allow suffering to speak. Everybody's suffering. And it stands for unapologetic love. Never be ashamed to talk about the love in you. The love that you're trying to generate, promote. There's not a lot of talk about love because it's been colonized by Hollywood. So it becomes just superficial, mamby-pamby, sentimental feeling rather than the most magnificent thing in the history of the world. Love is the key that unlocks the door that leads toward ultimate reality. And it's a model for a leader. That's why anytime I talk to leaders, anybody who is in love with being a leader, but not in love with the people who you plan to lead, you better check yourself. Don't tell me about your skills for leadership if you're unable to express and exemplify how your skills will be forms of service, love, care, and concern for the folk that you are zeroing in on. That's the reason why you can get a Fannie Lou Hamer or Martin King or Malcolm X and others. Because all the skills that they accumulated, they were still examples of kenosis. And this is very important. Kenosis. 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 Kenosis means self-giving. It means self-emptying. It means self-offering, self-donating. It is sacrificial. And that sits at the very center of the Christian way of life. To be able to have such a sensitivity to others, especially the widow and the orphan, and the fatherless and the motherless, the homeless, the poor. Anybody who's wrestling with forms of catastrophe in their life. What is that? That includes everybody. Because catastrophe is on its way to your house. One way or another. When your mama dies, that's catastrophe. I don't care how much money you have. When your friends betray you, I don't care how much money you have, that's catastrophe. When you're broke with the Ten Commandments financially, that's catastrophe. When you're dealing with decrepit school systems in inner city, when you got indecent housing, when you don't have enough jobs with a living wage, when you don't have access to health care that can take care of your body, when you're living in an empire where you think you can drop bombs on folk and get away with it with no accountability, as if chickens don't come home to roost, you got to come to terms with catastrophe. Now let's go back to the history of black folk. That's why we're a blues people. Because the blues ain't nothing but narratives of catastrophe lyrically expressed. And the history of white supremacy in this nation is the history of catastrophes visited on black people, indigenous people, Mexican peoples, and others. There's never been a race problem in America. There's been catastrophes visited on people. And the shift from the catastrophic to the problematic is the attempt to deodorize the suffering. You got to be funk masters. Always keep that in mind when you move into your positions. Just listen to a little James Brown and George Clinton and Rick James. Where's my Buffalo sister? There she is. Oh, yeah. The genius Rick James. What was he trying to do? He was trying to keep deodorized discourse at arm's length. Because when you keep it funky, that's where the love is. That's where the freedom is. Deodorized discourse is superficial. Let's have a nice talk about diversity. It's so nice to have people who just look different than me, and I'm just feeling like that just enriches my experience. So, oh, I feel good. Could you pass the tacos? I feel Spanish today. No, we talk about something human. I don't care what color you are. And we talk about people who struggle for freedom, dignity, to be treated decently. So beneath the deodorized discourse of diversity is what? Funky, vicious legacies of white supremacy, male supremacy, empire, predatory capitalism. That's the truth. The condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. That's part of the challenge. It's very difficult to sustain serious truth talk in many professional contexts. Truth is too much. Oh, too Socratic. Don't want to be on earth like that. Don't want to be unsettled like that. Well, that's what education at its deepest level is. It's the formation of attention, trying to attend to the things that really matter. What really matters, life and death. What really matters, joy and sorrow. What really matters, greatness and witness. But the superficial things, status, position, pleasure. And this is a major challenge for our young people. We can get into that in question and answer, because it's one of the saddest things about our present moment is to agree with so many young people, often unloved and uncared for, drifting, rootless, don't have access to exemplars of moral and spiritual greatness. All they see is celebrities walking around like peacocks. Look at me, look at me, look at me. I got so much money, I got mansions, I got a trophy spouse, blah, 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 blah. And you can hear Rosetta Tharpe on her guitar saying peacocks strut because they can't fly. don't want to be no peacock. I don't want people just look at me and the first thing they see is celebrity status rather than how you're using your celebrity status to be a force for good so put a smile on your grandmama's face from the grave. That's a quest for moral and spiritual greatness. Which means what? You're going to get in a whole lot of trouble. But I can hear some of the ancestors under slavery. And let's keep in mind, it was against the law for black people to worship God. Over 200 years in this nation, under the U.S. Constitution, without white supervision. So they had to illegally steal away in a ring shout and hold hands near the creek. And they enacted the Negro National Anthem. What's the Negro National Anthem? Somebody tell me. Lift every voice and sing. It doesn't say lift every echo, does it? Echo's a peacock. I'm just an extension of the echo chamber. I'm just an extension of the voices I hear in my silence. You got to find your voice just like your fingerprint. There's nobody like you in the world. Nobody got your fingerprint in the world. Nobody's got your voice in the world. And when they lifted their voice, one of the songs they sang was what? Wade in the water. God gonna trouble the water. Just like Nahum, that minor prophet. But God comes in the whirlwind and the storm. You encounter God in that whirlwind. Marcus Garvey said, when I come back to the United States, you're going to find me in the whirlwind. Garvey was a Christian. People forget about that. Deep Christian, actually converted to Catholicism at the end of his life. But he was Methodist. Jamaican like Bob Marley and them. Find me in the whirlwind. That's shaking things up. Find me in the awakenings that's taking place in churches, in mosques and synagogues. Awakening having to do with sensitivity. Waking having to do with ecological catastrophe. Wakings having to do with wealth inequality. Awakenings having to do with hatred and mistreatment of anybody. That's where the encounter often takes place. That's where one is to be found. But to be found there means you got to hold on to the 4 pillars of excellence and prophetic leadership. And the 4 pillars were put forward by the greatest public intellectual in the history of the United States. His name was W.B. Du Bois. I'm sure many of you read some Du Bois. Is that right? You can go read some good Du Bois? Oh, yes, I wish I had my blackboard. Put up Du Bois, Souls of Black Folk, Black Reconstruction, The Ordeal of Manzar. And he said for every leader, every freedom fighter, there's 4 fundamental questions. The first one is, how does integrity face oppression? How will you be able to enact your intellectual, spiritual, and moral integrity so that you will be consistent and be able to hold at arm's length cupidity and venality? The second question is, what does honesty do in the face of deception? All the lies which often hide and conceal the crimes, the mendacity tied to criminality, honesty. You think, good God Almighty, honesty is not a subversive value. Get off the symbolic crack pipe. You really, really push honesty far in your own life, is going to change you, let alone in the society in which you live. America, you're concerned about Russian interference in the election. Rightly so. Russians need to stay away and do what they want to do in their own country. But we got 87 interventions in just Latin America since 1945, overthrowing democratic governments like Guatemala and Brazil and Dominican Republic. We ain't even got to Iran in 1953. What you talking about being so obsessed with somebody interfering with you and you intervening and turning folk around? Chile, September 11th, 1973. We go on and on and on. Brother West, how come you're full of so much anger? I'm just trying to be honest. I'm just trying to be consistent. That's all. That's all. Honesty. The third, decency. How to be decent in the face of being assaulted and insulted. Decency, subversive? Yes. But what is the opposite of decency? Well, it's got a number of opposites, but we can try out 2 examples. 1, indifference to the suffering of others. That's indecent. That's indecent. Don't care what color they are. Class, agenda, whatever you see. The great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel used to say, indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. We've created a whole culture of indifference. There's nowhere in the God's heaven you can have 1 out of 2 children who are brown or black in America living in utter poverty in the richest nation, the history of the world, without there being a massive attempt to engage in the abolition of poverty. Thank God for William Barber. Thank God for Liz Theo Harris with the Poor People's Campaign. And we know Brother Martin Luther King Jr. was doing what? Zeroing in precisely on that issue. He was meeting with brown brothers and sisters, and red ones, and yellow ones, and white ones. He was concerned about poor folk across the board. But it's indifference. Brother Martin said what? A Vietnamese baby has exactly the same value as an American baby. That's just being decent. He went to Vacation Bible School in Jim Crow Gut Bucket, Atlanta, Ebenezer Baptist Church. What are the songs they sang? Jesus loved the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black or white. They are precious in His sight. Now, he became a fundamentalist Christian about that line. I know a whole lot of evangelical Christians who like to be fundamentalists about certain lines. But not that one. No, not that one. They waving the flag. You can drop your drones all around the world. You can kill people who you disagree with right on the spot, because their life has very little value compared to other folks' value in America. I used to hear folk in Vacation Bible School say, don't forget now, Jesus loves all the little children. He can say just the white ones, he can say just the black ones, he can say just the red ones, all of them equal. So when your child gets mistreated, your jaws get tight. But when a child on the chocolate side of town gets mistreated, keep sipping your tea. That's indifference. That's how your conscience gets coarsened. That's how your heart gets hardened. That's how your soul gets chilly rather than warm and aflow. And let's go back to the history of black folk just briefly. The soulfulness of leadership. You gotta have a soulful leadership. What is it about the voice of an Aretha Franklin, or a Phyllis Hyman, or Russell Topkins Jr. of the Stylistics, or Ted Mills of Blue Magic, or the Sky Twins of the Whisperers? And we ain't got to Curtis Mayfield, the genius of geniuses. What is it about their voices? That they are soulful. And soulfulness is the sharing of a soothing sweetness against the backdrop of catastrophe. So when you teach the world about love, and you know justice is what love looks like in public, always remember as leaders, tenderness is what love feels like in your private relations. And there's an intimate connection between justice and tenderness. Because any justice that's only justice soon degenerates into something less than justice. You got to have some love at the bottom of it, or you end up making justice an idol, making you look good because you're such a do-gooder. You get this a lot among liberals and neoliberals who want to trot out their charity and philanthropy, but don't want to deal with justice in terms of the systematic analysis of power. Because it ain't about you. It's about something bigger than you. And it also has to do with how you connect to other people. Soulfulness is about sweetness. It's the intimacy in the voice of a David Ruffin, lead singer of the Temptations, that will lead you to some empowerment, or an Anita Baker, or a whole host of others. We got so many examples we don't have. We got the four greatest of all, and Billy, and Carmen, and Sarah, and Dinah. Gotta have five. I'm sorry about I'm sorry, I'm not giving the last name. You all can ask me about the last names in question and answer. But we're talking about the highest exemplars of moral and spiritual excellence and greatness that have to do with a tenderness and sweetness in their artistry that touches people at the deepest level of their souls. So leadership in that sense has to be so much deeper than just the professional definition of it. We're talking about the humanistic conception of it and the ways in which it can be enacted and embodied both on the ground with the skills that you're learning here in Pepperdine. But the last question for divorce, keep in mind with divorce, we got integrity, we got honesty, we got decency. The last one's courage. And courage is the enabling virtue of all the other virtues. Because you can talk about all the virtues in the world, but if you are cowardly, you'll never be able to enact the other virtues. That's why Mahatma Gandhi, one of our great Hindu brothers, who was an absolute pacifist. He hated violence, but he would say in nearly every speech, he said, I hate cowardliness more than violence. That's Gandhi. That's Gandhi. Martin Luther King Jr. would always say, I'd rather be dead than afraid. I'd rather be dead than afraid. And one of the reasons why it's been so difficult to shift from deodorized discourses to dealing with the painfulness and the ugliness of the real suffering and struggle is because the powers that be want to keep people afraid. They want to keep people afraid. And again, the Black Freedom Movement is probably one of the best examples of this. And that's precisely the aim of white supremacist powers that be as it's connected to the economy and the nation state. To niggerize black people. And when you niggerize the people, you try to convince them they're less beautiful, less intelligent, and have lower moral character. And to keep them so afraid and scared and intimidated that they walk around laughing when it ain't funny, scratching when it don't itch, looking for the mainstream approval just to be patted on the back so somehow they can think good about themselves, as if that is the major point of reference on the vanilla side of town, rather than the kingdom of God bigger than every human being, or even bigger than their grandmama who loved them when the white supremacist status quo was coming at them tooth and nail. You see? And that's exactly why when you talk about prophetic leadership, you're talking about courage, integrity, honesty, decency, and you could easily be on the road to being misunderstood and misconstrued, having to come to terms with character assassination. When Martin Luther King Jr. died, 72% of white Americans disapproved of Martin. Many thought he's just an agent of the North Vietnamese. But then we forget, 51% of black people disapproved of Martin when he died. He was all by himself because they thought he'd gone too far in his critique of Vietnam. We're patriotic. It's the flag. Martin said, American government, my own government is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. That's what he said at Riverside Church, April 4th, 1967. We're going to be right back there in a few months, my dear brother Riverside. I can't wait to get there with Susanna Heschel, the daughter of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And who's the other one? Is it Eddie Glaude?
No, it is Clayton Carson.
Oh, the great Clayton Carson, Stanford University. And we're going to be talking about not just the speech, but the dialogue that happened right after that speech. But after that, 178 editorials in the newspaper said Martin Luther King Jr. has lost his way. Martin Luther King Jr. ain't nothing but a communist. Martin Luther King Jr. is going outside of his domain because oftentimes, especially for people of color, they want to keep you under a certain label, keep you under a certain category. Always make sure that you ghettoize and peripheralize in terms of your identity as opposed to your human identity if what your color is one aspect among a whole host of other aspects. You're supposed to be a civil rights leader. What did Martin say? He said, it's so sad that most folks never understood. They never knew. 12 months later, my dear brother's dead. They never knew me. How come they never knew me? Because I'm a Christian tied to a calling, not a career, a vocation, not a profession. I got a life task, not just a job. I'm tied to a love. And every form of love is a form of learning how to die in order to learn how to live. If you fall in love, that's a form of death. But that old egoistic, narcissistic self all of a sudden just starts fading away, and you now entangled with somebody else, walk around with a smile on your face. Everybody look at you. Oh my God, you look different. Oh, what happened to you? You must have undergone a change in transformation. I learned how to die, I think. That's what I do. That old lonely self I used to have. It's different now. That's a deep thing, isn't it? It's a beautiful thing. Look at all the smiles on there right now. But of course, life says what? Sappho, love is bittersweet. You better get ready for some Frankie Beverly joy and pain. There ain't no joy without the pain. Ain't no love without the struggle. But so it is when you fall in love with truth, or fall in love with goodness, or fall in love with beauty, or fall in love with God. Dorothy Day wrote the most profound eulogy for Martin Luther King Jr., April 5th, 1968. Catholic worker. You all know the great Dorothy Day. She's one of the great Catholic prophetic figures in the history of this nation. She said, Martin Luther King Jr. learned how to die daily. Dropped the mic and left. He learned how to die daily. Now we know in the New Testament, Paul says what? Christians must die daily in order to live. When you die, you start examining yourself so that the worst of you can be pushed aside so the best of you can move forward. Education is about learning how to die because we're trying to get our students to critically examine assumptions they have, and there's certain assumptions they need to let go. And when they let those assumptions go, that's a form of death in order for them to live more maturely, more compassionately, more critically. And it's an endless process that all of us are in that perennial process. I don't know, where was my sister who was talking about this video that you were showing folk yesterday with Anderson Cooper. Yeah, there's my dear sister here. We were talking about this because we always get in trouble with talking about this too. When I was talking, I always called Trump a brother. On TV, they said, "Oh, Brother West, you lost your mind. How is he your brother?" I said, "I'm a Christian. I'm not trying to talk in order for popularity. I'm trying to hold on to my spiritual integrity. He's made in the image and likeness of God." But then I said, "He's a gangster," which he is too. Dead up, based on the evidence. The way he treats women, the way he talks about other folk. 16,471 lies in a few years. You got to be real good at lying. That's gangster activity. But then I go on to say, I was a gangster before I met Jesus, and now I'm a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivity. It's the gangster in me. I can hate like anybody else. I just decide not to. Come on. I can terrorize other folk good. I just decide not to. I grew up with gangsters, and I love them to death. Right there on the Charter side of Sacramento, in Glendale. I grew up with thugs. I love them to death. But when you love, you respect, protect, and correct. All three. We relate as human beings. I tell them where I think they went wrong. They tell me where I went wrong. Because they could argue with Brother West, Harvard ain't nothing but another prison. You know that now. I'm in prison, you in prison. I say that's a good point. And of course, the broader point is all of us have a death sentence in time and space. Not one of us getting out alive. Culinary delights, terrestrial worms, can't wait. Oh, that body just on its way. Those worms just looking. Oh, that body looks good. Your body looks good too. Ain't going after your identity, ain't going after your ethnicity, your race, your gender. The worm's just waiting for your body. Humando, burial. That's our human connection. But as Christians, the claim is what? As for Christians, the claim is moral and spiritual excellence tied to prophetic leadership means that, lo and behold, even as the cracked vessels that we are, each and every one of us, with some gangster element shot through every one of us. Now, I always have somebody come up to me and say, Brother West, I'm not a perfect person, but I don't really have any gangster element. I just don't. I said, well, let me get inside of your dream. Everybody got some gangster element. And you're not a saint. Because every saint ain't nothing but a sinner that looks at the world through the lens of the heart. And every saint got a past. Usually some funky stuff in that past. Read a little Dostoevsky for that. And every sinner has a future. It can change and be transformed. Just like every student in your classes, every student you'll have jurisdiction over. It'll be come in different forms. We enact different ways of life. They all can have a better future. And the ones that think that they're so much better than the others, there were moments in their life when they were not at all. That's the challenge that we're after. So when you have a magnificent teacher like my dear brother, Father and Sister Irene, working with him too, and you say, oh my God, I know he can't have gangster in him. He's just such a sweet, magnificent man. He said, well, I understand the Christian insights about this thing. Brother West, I lean every once in a while. Is that right, brother? You lean every once in a while, don't you? That's how he got it. And he's not just saying that just be saying it. He's my brother. And he correct me. But what that does again is give us a humility for empowerment. That gives us a way in which we don't have to be self-righteous in order to be forces for good. And it also means we're able to learn and listen from those we disagree with. You could be a right-wing conservative brother or sister enrolled at Liberty University. And you still have a sanctity that God gave you, and the world can't take it away. And you still have the capacity to change, even though somebody like myself may disagree with him, may agree with him about 5 or 10% of the time. That's the challenge that we have. And we haven't even begun to get into what the raw stuff of democracy is. Because there is no such thing as a democratic experiment in which there's public life and citizenship where people are respected and people have access to resources and rights that's worthy of their humanity. There's no such thing without the pillars of integrity, honesty, decency, generosity, and empathy. No democracy can survive based on indifference, callousness, escalating wealth inequality, white supremacy running amok, male supremacy running amok, hatred of gay brothers and lesbian sisters and precious trans, and losing sight of indigenous peoples and brown peoples who are often here before English-speaking Europeans arrived. That's what Malcolm X meant when he said, chickens come home to roost. Sooner or later, you're going to reap what you sow. You can't live in a state of denial and deodorized discourse and act as if your history won't come back to haunt you. And that's very much why what you are doing here is so crucial. Why Pepperdine, at its best, is so crucial. Because you will constitute in your example, in your living, your thinking, your laughing, your loving, the forces for good, the glue that can hold together a fragile democratic experiment. And if we can't, we slide down the slope, not just to chaos and anarchy, but to fascism. And that's where we're headed at the moment. Above the law. Say anything with no responsibility or accountability. Do anything with impunity. Say anything about somebody to crush them, to demean them, to degrade them, and think you can just walk away and get away with it. It creates a fascist mentality, then tied to the rule of big military. 61 cents out of every dollar goes to the military-industrial complex, so we don't have money for education, but let us go to war and see how that money flows so quickly. And big money, 1% of the population owning 41% of the wealth. Wall Street crimes taking place across the board. Insider trading, market manipulation, predatory lending, fraudulent activity. How many Wall Street gangsters went to jail? Zero. But let Juan or Jose or Jamal and Letitia get caught with a crack bag tonight. They're going straight to jail. That's how deeply racist and classist the rule of law is. No democracy can survive, given the deepening and sedimenting of those realities. Same is true in terms of domestic violence. Same is true in the ways in which women are viciously dominated and manipulated. It's a sign of a spiritual emptiness and a moral vacuity. That's why the primacy of the moral and the spiritual when it comes to excellence in education here at Pepperdine is so very important. Very, very important indeed. And I simply say to each and every one of you that as you become leaders with a kenosis, a giving of others, given the gifts that you have in your quest for moral and spiritual greatness, you will then plant seed that you may not ever see sprouting, that can keep alive the best of what has come before. And of course, in the end, there's no guarantee. America could in fact be another grand empire like Rome and Britain that had its golden age and is now fading, decaying, declining. In many ways, without the kind of moral awakening and regeneration in the name of greatness. That's the only way you can come to the rescue. That's why Martin Luther King Jr.'s organization was formed, what? To redeem the soul of America. It wasn't just about public policy. It's about spirituality and morality, too. And we know that none of us are messiahs. We're all human beings trying to be the forces that we can be. And the crucial thing is, again, back to my own tradition of black freedom struggle, that you got to look catastrophe in the face, unflinchingly, and not allow the despair to have the last word. Ain't nothing wrong with despairing. Anybody living in America today not wrestling with despair don't have enough sensitivity, because it doesn't look good. But should never allow despair to have the last word. Ever. Like a blues man. B.B. King come out on the stage. Nobody loves me but my mama, and she might be driving too. That's the blues. Look the catastrophe in the face, but with smile, style, fortitude. You keep fighting anyway. So as leaders, just say to yourself, Ella told Duke, don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And that swing got some love in it, freedom in it, it got some sting in the swing. Because it's gonna hurt. But it's gonna hurt in order for you to be fortified. I didn't say awoke. My young brothers and sisters who I love so dearly tell me, Brother West, I'm trying to stay woke. I'm staying where I say you're going to suffer from it. You saw me. You're going to stay woke all the time. Learn something from an old brother like me. I've been at this freedom struggle for 53 years, and I got some sleep, goddamn. And some napping, too. Because I was taught not to stay awoke, but to stay fortified. That's something different. Fortitude is courage with a moral and spiritual dimension to it. I saw a lot of courage in Charlottesville when those neo-Nazi brothers was spitting on us and calling us names. And we singing This Little Light of Mine. I'm singing out of tune, but that's all right. Coming from my soul. They about to crush us like cockroaches. They were courageous, but they were thugs and gangsters. With the gangster and thuggish cause, neo-Nazis. Our vicious Nazi soldiers in Germany were courageous. They were just gangsters and thugs. There's a whole lot of white supremacists and male supremacists and xenophobes who are courageous, which means they're willing to live and die. Because courage is ideologically promiscuous. It align with anything. Right wing, left wing, right, wrong. But when courage is connected to something moral and spiritual, then you've got a cause that's right and righteous, tied to a love and a justice. And I tell the young folk all the time, make sure all of your energy is not filtered through hatred and revenge, but rather love and justice. That's a challenge that we need. Thank you all so very much. We're going to open it up for questions. We're going to open it up for dialogue.